attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granosky. Welcome to the program. Happy to be with you all. And we're live across FM and AM, or if you're catching us on our podcast, make sure you share and review and pass it around to other folks if you're enjoying the news coverage, the analysis that we provide in various fields, not just politics and economics, but also, things related to our personal finance, looking into the cutting edge of physics and chemistry and all kinds of things that are relevant for building the future that we want. We also put a big emphasis on education, freedom, and being able to learn how to think, not just what to think. And so that's what we enjoy having these conversations driven by, is that theme. And so one of the things you can always remember is to visit our website, aneighborschoice.com, if you want to scroll through the archive and see all the various interviews and look at some of the newsmakers that we interview and go back and enjoy some of the articles that we publish on a regular basis, movie reviews. We've got a lot of different things to enjoy on aneighborschoice.com. But joining me now is someone who is the founder and leader of DownsizeDC.org. We have political analyst Jim Babka. How you doing, Jim?
I'm well, David. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It's great to have you on the program again. And I wanted to just start off by getting your take. As the founder of Downsize DC, you've got a real desire to downsize DC. So what do you think of Kamala Harris? You think this is the one that's going to be the downsizer?
No, of course not. They see an opportunity for government to be involved in every aspect of our lives in every way possible, and to make a lot of our decisions for us free. Of course, nobody says if nobody's going to have to pay for it. David, I was actually surprised that this was the pick. Because we've just gone through a couple of months where we have been told that Black Lives Matter. We've been told that police reform was necessary. We've been told that the system we have systemic racism in the system. And I don't think the Democratic Party could have picked a worse standard bearer on this subject. She's got a horrible record. Tulsi Gabbard basically, torpedoed her presidential campaign during the debates, if you recall, just by simply exposing the facts of her record. And so to make matters worse, Joe Biden is basically trying to reinvent himself. He's got a very long career where he was very much on the wrong side of these progressive issues before. I can't believe that the party is enthusiastic about this. Now, they're going to muster some kind of enthusiasm, even if they have to be hypocrites to do so, because their real thing that seems to drive them is anyone but Trump. I don't think they actually care about any of these issues. I think they'll say whatever they have to say, and this is really the only inspiration or animation that they have is that they are in opposition to Trump. I don't think they really have a cause per se. So to sum up, I was kind of surprised that this was the pick that they made.
Yeah, and I guess it's, to me, it shows how out of touch the establishment is. And they're betting on the fact that, identity politics and the narratives that they're going to spin 24/7 as PR firms for their campaign and much of the media will override the obvious record of carnage, particularly visited upon foreigners, that Biden and Kamala Harris and also those who, are incarcerated for nonviolent crimes. It's an interesting narrative that's unfolding. And, people on the right have criticized President Trump for having a mixed message. On the one hand, he points out that Joe Biden was the architect behind the crime bill and many of the things that locked up people for onerous sentences for nonviolent crimes. But then on the other side, he tries to have this narrative that if Biden is elected, he is a Trojan horse for, soft on crime, radical leftism that will defund the police and destroy law and order. And when you look at that, that's a kind of muddled message, right? And so you say, well, how can you actually tighten that up if you actually wanted to make a message that was close to the truth? Any thoughts on that?
I don't really have any particular thoughts, and I'm not sure that, if I'm playing, putting on a political consultant hat, I'm not really sure that Trump is doing the wrong thing, because I think that he has spent most of his time appealing to his base. And what I do suspect is that Kamala Harris is going to put on her Nike shoes and go running as fast as she can from her record. So maybe what he needs to do is try to press them so that they feel like they can't quite, get away from their own record. They've got to try to sound like they're tough on crime at the same time. So maybe they have exactly the same problem he has. I don't really know what's best in this situation. For my part, I'm going to vote my conscience. I'm not going to vote for either one of these candidates. Mm-hmm. I'm throwing my lot in with Jo Jorgensen, who does have a consistent, coherent message to offer on this, and she does want to she wants to end all of the incarceration that we've got. We have our prison population, David, is the largest on the planet, both in real terms and in per capita terms. Worse than Russia, worse than China, worse than other totalitarian states. We have more people in prison, and a lot of them are there for nonviolent drug-related offenses. And we've talked about this on your show before. As a matter of fact, I think that this has been very destructive to our culture. It's damaged our families in the inner city tremendously. We need to do something to begin to reverse this. And the movement that began this summer to the hollow talk of defund the police, was a step in the right direction, in that we started to get to the real issue, which is that this system requires violence in order to run. If I want something, instead of me persuading you for it, I will go to politicians and ask them to beat you about the head and shoulders until you do what I've insisted you do. And so only Jo Jorgensen is going to address that issue.
Yeah, and the reason I don't get behind this defund the police narrative of the media is that it's not aimed at actually getting rid of the tons and tons of regulations and nanny state license laws and victimless crimes. It's all aimed at defunding the police when it comes to protecting life and property. And so I reject that frame of that whole campaign, because
I think it's even worse than that, David. My guess is that it means that we're going to start eventually arming social workers of various kinds. And they may show up for various thought crimes and psychological issues, ways you engage with your children, and on it goes. I'm not enthusiastic with the left's vision of this here. I think they hijacked a very legitimate concept that had been pioneered by civil libertarians for quite some time. And they've shown up kind of late to the party and said, "Oh, that's a good hashtag. Let's run with that."
Mm-hmm. And I could see them doing fines and social workers armed with lethal force coming in to fine you for microaggressions or something you say. If you didn't read White Fragility Part 2, you will be fined. And what they want to do is create a totally digital society where you keep hearing them talk about there's no cash available, there's no coins. What do you think's behind that? That's been strange. Everywhere you go, they're out of coins.
It's easy, much easier to trace digital transactions, and it's also much easier, it turns out, to turn off funding channels for dissenting voices. Right. We are entering an era that I call neo-feudalism. Almost all of our communications exist on social media and pass through channels like Google and major cell phone carriers. And so a handful of corporations basically have that. And then on the digital currency front, there's also a handful of carriers for that information right now. And so, like, if you're using Stripe, for example, which is a service that we happen to use, Stripe can say, "Hey, we don't want to extend service to certain types of clients." Facebook can say, "We're going to block certain types of messaging." So what we're doing effectively is we're living on these feudal plantations now, and we don't have any representation within those structures. Will we outcompete them? Will alternatives emerge? Yes, and yes, they will. But what if it takes 10 years? What if it takes 20 years? And how will the powers that be come to capture those too? The powers that be greatly resent the internet. We had just a month ago, we had the folks at MSNBC organizing and encouraging a boycott led by one of their own staff people against Facebook, because Facebook was not censoring at the level that Alphabet over at YouTube and Twitter were censoring people. They wanted Mark Zuckerberg to engage in much higher levels of censorship and more direct, blunt versions of it. And they organized an advertising boycott, tried to take some business away from his platform to send a message to him that they were going to flex their muscle on this. And this is the dying dinosaur of the regime media trying to keep itself relevant. I mean, they're suffering when we can communicate and deliver news directly to each other, when individuals can become journalists instead of large corporate approved institutions. They become less relevant. And so in the fight to keep the meteor from taking out their dinosaur system, they're trying to organize whatever ways they can to fight these social media powers. And the social media powers are very, very responsive. They're very, very interested in, okay, we'll cooperate, we'll go along with this because we want to stay in business too. And the rest of us are kind of stuck on kind of this feudal farm where we're only allowed to have the information that they permit. We're only allowed to have the currency or raise the money that they permit us to have. I think this is actually kind of a very difficult time we're going through right now.
Yeah, and you're a libertarian, and I want to know, have you updated or modified, or are you rethinking some of your ideological commitments or refining some of them in the light of the fact that so much of this digital feudalism is being outsourced to private companies? You have, Visa and MasterCard shutting people out for just having an alternative opinion. And how can you even survive in a digital economy if that continues? And how can you, does libertarian thought need an update in the time of a digital commons like we have? We'll ask that question and more when we continue in just a moment, live with Jim Babka, founder of DownsizeDC.org. We'll be back in a second.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for their loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less, delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at FastFreshSeafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. FastFreshSeafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
Here's one thing you can scratch off your to-do list without going anywhere, without any out-of-pocket cost to you, and even get up to $150 cash back. Get that crack in your windshield fixed by calling Auto Glass America. They'll come to you, and with comprehensive insurance coverage, there's no cost to you. Call Glass America now and fix that pain in the glass with premium glass and a lifetime warranty. Call 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS. Auto Glass America.
And now, Easy Lift Movers is on the air, reminding all Americans to show support to the brave men and women of our U.S. military. Their bravery and tireless efforts should never go unnoticed. This salute is brought to you by Easy Lift Movers, serving the community with quality and pride. Call the pros today, 813-505-8474. That's 813-505-8474. Also, all troops and veterans will receive a 10% discount. That's Easy Look Movers, proudly serving all troops and veterans. They're professionals who care.
Nobody wants to get ripped off, broken into, or robbed, but nobody wants to pay a lot of money to have their home protected either. I've got an offer to tell you about to provide home security for your home. For less than $1 a day with no other costs, you can get your home secured. Plus, get a lifetime equipment replacement warranty. You need protection for your home. Call the Home Security Hotline right now.
800-361-3491. Again, that's 800-361-3491.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gronowski. We're coming to you live across FM and AM, as well as podcast and video live stream. We're here with Jim Babka, founder of DownsizeDC.org, talking about the state of the political election and the whole direction our country's headed in light of this pandemic political nightmare that has been unfolding before us. And so, Jim, I want to just touch back to that point there. Do you think you need to update you consider yourself a libertarian. Do you need to update maybe or modify your approach to being focused on the principle of, everything is about dismantling state power, when in fact this neo-feudalism has created this kind of environment in which the digital commons are being, patrolled in a fascistic cartel type way, where you can't even say alternative opinions about medicine. You can't say alternative opinions about war. I mean, at what point are these people aggressing? If they're using their publishing status in a way that can destroy the entire common, discourse.
So it's a great question. And I'm always updating a little bit, but it turns out that the answer was kind of right in front of me all along. So let me say, first off, I think that any prescription that's going to use force, like who am I going to turn to? Am I going to turn to the politicians to protect me? How's that going to work out? The chances are it's not going to work out at all. It's going to, what will then happen is that we will further strengthen these forces. Mark Zuckerberg is very much a character who is saying, don't throw me there in that briar patch, right? He is very much a character that is like, oh, please, please, don't regulate me, oh, please, and meanwhile he's saying, oh, come on, regulate me good and hard. And the reason that he wants that is that it will keep his competitors out. And the number one approach that we can, or antidote to this problem, is a competitor that can provide the service that everyone's looking at, or looking for. And so that's the number one thing. But the answer was kind of buried in there kind of all along. There is kind of a crypto-anarchist approach. And, one area that we already see that it is at work is in alternative currency. The debate that we were having in the early part of the century when Ron Paul was talking about end the Fed was, can we get gold to be competitive, or can we get even competitive currency going? Well, the competitive currency was invented subsequently in Bitcoin, and now there's other types of digital currency that are available out there that are not controlled by governments. And that the blockchain and the approaches that are that can come from that offer, I think, tremendous hope. What I think is going to happen for them to kind of really rise to prominence is and really become central to what we do is two things. They have not made those products easy enough for regular consumers to use yet. I mean, really, really ridiculously simple, and like your credit card is. And second, I think we need an event, a catalyzing event, such as a monetary crisis. And if you look at what the federal government's doing with their money right now in the Fed, boy, that seems like that's on the horizon. So, you put those two things together, and I think we would be able to establish a system that's independent of the state for money. That would really, by the way, hugely disempower the state. And so many of these actors that have played off of them, that have used special privileges and access to put themselves in the positions of power that they have now. So my update to my thinking is basically to go back to the roots and figure out, okay, the state is not going to be my solution. How do we compete our way out of this?
So that means that we're going to have to go through a lot of dark times, because these banks and credit card companies weren't built overnight, and they have such power entrenched and such influence in media and the regulatory system and the whole thing. And then you have this biggest weapon of all, which is the masses voting, and they vote. And that's a very violent and scary thing, because as we can tell, the thing that's so disturbing to me is that the masses seem to get so excited about virtue signaling their concern for the justice of the minority community and different folks, but yet they so quickly go into the campaign of a Biden or a Hillary or a Kamala Harris, who have just sown terror and subjugated people of color all over the country, all over the world, in Libya and Syria, here at home through their prison industrial complex. And it doesn't seem to really bother a lot of the folks that are excited about all this political correctness. So, which is very disturbing to me, because it makes me wonder, does the average person, do they actually care at all? Or is this all some kind of fake religion that they're touting and parroting in the name of victims, but they actually have no care for protecting real victims from violence?
Well, I think it's more the fake religion thing, and this, veers back into a favorite topic of yours and mine. I think we are at an interesting stage in our cultural revolution where the violence, the rivalry, the mimesis that we're engaged in, the imitation of one another, is very much, in a state where we're all equals. It's no longer distant. We're no longer imitating, some exemplar that we don't really have direct contact with. The imitation that we're engaging now is with our equals. And Rene Girard very clearly spelled out that is actually the most dangerous, violent place to be. And we have the opportunity now to get on social media and signal the hell out of each other. Boy, look at what a great person I am. The real genius of Mark Zuckerberg's device is that he did figure out how to harness the power of virtue signaling. Mm-hmm. Everyone wanted to do it, and he made it not only inexpensive and easy, he made it, so that it had an endorphin rush to it. It just really charged us up. And so we virtue signal, and then we look to see who else is going to signal with us. And then you take us and put us in this COVID experiment, where we're all kind of locked in our homes, and we're not having face-to-face contact with each other, and we can begin to breed mistrust over our differences on top of all of that. So I think this is a very dangerous time. Now, here's the good news. We always do seem, even if we have to go through some darkness to go through it, we do always seem to emerge on the other side, adjusting to the way things are and learning new lessons about how, and even inventing some taboos about what it is that we should or shouldn't do, how we should treat each other after we've been through an experience like this. But we are babes in the woods when it comes to this new parity we have with one another, this new level of rivalry that we have with one another, where we're virtue signaling the hell out of each other.
We'll be back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski here with Jim Babka of DownsizeDC.org. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hurricane conditions in the next 36 hours.
You know what hurricanes can do.
Devastating damage expected.
We want you to know, no matter how bad things get,
Power outages. This is life-threatening.
you can stay up to date with the latest information here. Your home for news, talk, and information. And remember, we'll keep an eye on the tropics. You keep an ear on us.
Batteries in the flashlight.
The all-new News Talk 1040 WHBO. Radio.
Presidential hopeful Joe Biden and running mate Senator Kamala Harris are in Delaware today for their first appearance shortly. ABC's Mark Remillard is there.
It's either been oppressively hot and humid or storming and downpouring here at this high school in northeast Wilmington, where Joe Biden will formally introduce Kamala Harris as his running mate. The announcement came in an email to supporters yesterday, but this will be their first campaign appearance together, though it's not really clear what this event will look like. It's here at a high school, and about 100 people or so have showed up here hoping that they can get inside, but none of them know if they will.
Harris is the first black and Indian American woman on a major party ticket. DNC Chair Tom Perez says Harris also has the credentials as a former Attorney General.
Kamala Harris is ready to govern day one. I've known her for a long time. I know her family.
Harris will debate Vice President Mike Pence on October 7th in Utah. I'm Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Neighbor's Choice returns. We're live. I'm David Gronowski here with Jim Babka of DownsizeDC.org. And so, you were talking about how we're too similar in our society, and we're too close for comfort, right, Jim?
Yep.
So wouldn't that make it kind of your whole project of wanting to get rid of government kind of a dangerous thing to do? Because ultimately, isn't it violence that we're really concerned about? I mean, the idea of the state was originally, right, something that humans created as a kind of sacred vessel to contain violence with a little bit of smaller violence, right? And in theory, the idea would be maybe we could get to a point where we could just dismantle all this and all these folks that virtue signal about social justice, but then vote for people who bomb millions of people of color around the world, that they'll just magically become moral people. They're not, Jim. They're not going to be moral people, and they're not going to respect property. That's the scene. It seems to me that there needs to be, I don't know, it needs to be something that's a little bit more nuanced on the discussion about the role of the state in this, perhaps.
So there's a couple different ways I could go here. So first, my number one concern actually is not at present the violence. It's more the fact that the only purpose for a state is violence. The state, by its definition, is that institution which believes it has the moral authority to initiate violence, and it has a monopoly on that violence. So it's the only one that's allowed to do that. I am opposed to the concept that we can have any institution, period. To me, it's a completely subtle question that has the power to initiate violence or to use excessive force with impunity. Both of those things, to me, they cannot be done. You've just defined crime, and so how can an organization that claims to be a crime fighter also be a criminal institution? It falls in on itself. So you've got Satan throwing out Satan, right? I mean, it just isn't going to work.
Well, that's how the old kings, that the original form of the sacred state was, right? They would get the king to do and break taboos that the rest of the public was not allowed to break, so as to make them kind of sacred and special, to be a scapegoat in the waiting in case things went chaotic. You could go and take out the king and say, oh, well, we took him out because they're taking all the food, they're taking all the women, they're taking all the land, and they're doing really creepy stuff like incest and stuff like that kings would be associated with. So isn't that just the state doing things the same way, right? We get to do things because you don't get to do this, but that's why we're scapegoats, right?
It is doing the same things. But the state is what emerges. The king frankly had less power than the state. and that was because there were a series of other intermediary institutions, but those institutions had performed badly and they were aligned with the king. And so gradually those institutions were eroded and cut down, and as those institutions saw their power wane, then eventually the king saw his power wane, and we end up with what we now call the modern state. We've had the state since basically the Peace of Westphalia in the 1600s, the modern state. And, you know, the state, everybody's kind of familiar with it. I mean, almost every nation on the planet is organized as a state. So, yes, it's a continuation of the kings, but we're evolving, and hopefully we're evolving away from it. The concern that I have, to answer your very specific question, is about the tribes and how we organize ourselves tribally. So what happens right now in our present system is that everyone assumes that there are only two perspectives on a given issue. And both of those perspectives agree with each other on the most fundamental of things. And that is that we do have the right to force other people to do what we want. I had a very instructive discussion on Facebook just this morning with somebody who I love and respect, but who also happens to be a left statist. And I was trying to describe the difference between a policy, a mere policy, a preference that a group of people has, and a natural law. And so murder, you know, we can all see that that's an evil. We all 100%, we can take that to a jury and we can gain a unanimous conviction in a jury. But we can take something less significant, which might be that maybe you got to bow towards the Capitol once a day at high noon, or, you know, wear a mask while you're walking down the sidewalk on a public street. We can impose these preferences on others, and these don't have anywhere near the same unanimity. In fact, the mere imposition of them causes reactance. It causes people to disobey. The same way if you tell a child, because I told you so, they're going to respond. There's a part of our human nature, it's very well studied and understood in psychology, that says, you know, some people are simply going to react negatively to that. There may even be an adrenaline response where they, you know, go into fight or flight mode over what they're being, you know, ordered or commandeered to do. This force, this violence that's used just never seems to work out. I'm very interested in seeing those two tribes undone. There is more than two ways to look at an issue. The discussion that we're having here right now, no element of it will make the stage with Kamala Harris and Mike Pence or Donald Trump and Joe Biden. They will not discuss these issues. They will sit there and they will assume that they are going to gain the controls over the loot, and that they will get the power to disperse benefits and favors, punishments and chastisements, and on their allies, first on their allies and then on their enemies, respectively.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I just think that you know, maybe looking at, you know, voting for third parties or whatever, is that really a productive effort, or do you think that it's just kind of you know, just, you know, sending a signal of purity, or, you know?
Yeah, so productivity is kind of a separate question. You know, you're not, the show that I'm on right now with you, no disrespect intended, is not being broadcast, like, you know, to tens of millions of homes at the moment. And yet I feel that these times, these interactions where we have these very special conversations with the people who are willing to sit and listen, matter a lot. And the same thing's true with me saying in the poll, in the booth, I object. I do not consent to what you're doing. So I don't, you know, I almost don't care if my voice happens to be the only lonely one. That's, you know, I'm going to go in and express it that way because I have that opportunity to say, I simply don't agree with what you're saying.
Right.
And by having a candidate in this race, while other people are having this other dialogue, I can step in and interrupt their dialogue and say, well, you're really proud of the candidate you're backing? And you'd be surprised how many people are not. Every 4 years I go through this, are not proud of the candidate they're backing. They will admit to holding their nose as they vote for the candidate they're supporting. And that allows me to enter their mental chamber, play around with the dishes there of cognitive dissonance, or shaking and rickety all over their shelves they got there, shake them up a little bit, you know, get them, you know, provoke some thought. So that's the way I look at this. It's not really so much an efficacy case, because I'm not sure that that's what matters. I think what matters is, you know, putting your hand to the till wherever you find yourself and doing what you can. And so I love conversations like this. I like sitting down and talking about the real issues.
So, what do you think of? I've heard some folks in conservative circles say, "Hey, the reason why the right continues to lose against the left is that it's so stuck on this higher cause principle, and they don't fight back, they don't get in there and take it back. Like they use the example of what Tucker Carlson did when the New York Times was apparently doing a hit piece, and he went ahead of the story and said he called out the reporters who were allegedly going to publish details about where him and his family live, and he just put out their names and information. I don't think he doxed them, but he just said these are the reporters. And so and they were saying this is an example of what conservatives should have been doing all along. That they don't stand on principle. I mean, that they stick to this higher level of discourse, this rules of decorum, and then at the same time, these principles, whereas you're dealing with a leftist ideology that does not adhere to any of those principles and will do anything it takes to get power, including say that they're for Black Lives Matter as they bomb people of color all over the country, and they don't even bat an eye. They literally are at a nihilistic worldview. And so is it a losing game to stick to principles when you're dealing with something that's so effective generationally after generation that doesn't seem to have any moral foundation?
Would it be okay if I disagree with everything you just said, like completely and 100%?
Sure. That's what I wanted you to do. You're supposed to respond to the conservatives.
Because this is a discussion I was having the last, year and a half that I was on our mutual friend Jerry Hughes' show, again and again and again. And here's what I told him, and he hated it. What I'm about to say, he couldn't stand this because he viewed himself in a very specific way. I said there's no such thing as conservatism. It simply doesn't exist. And he said, no, I'm a conservative. I'm like, well, I'm not saying you don't exist, Jared. Clearly you do. But conservatives, as defined by William F. Buckley, I think it's a pretty credible source, said that they are people who stand athwart history yelling stop. And, switching gears a little bit to a, Warner Brothers cartoon, this far and no further, you varmint, this far and no further. The line keeps getting redrawn. So that you have a situation, my transition into becoming a libertarian was helped along by Bob Dole's candidacy in 1996. Bob Dole came into the Congress in the late 60s opposing the creation and expansion of Medicare and Medicaid. By the time he left, he said his biggest accomplishment was saving Social Security. And this is what conservatism does. It takes whatever it opposes today, and in 10, 15, 20 years, it blesses it and makes it sacrosanct. And so they're constantly redrawing the line, this far and no further, this far and no further, this far and no further. They don't have any principle. They don't even actually have a coherent philosophy to offer. They have no vision for what the world does. The progressives, on the other hand, do have a vision for where they want to go. They are driving and pushing the debate. They're the ones making the conservatives react to what they want to do because they have a place that they want to go. So I think the only thing that matters is a principle. I think the principle is the most important thing. I would love to see conservatives get principles. Now you say, well, they do have some principles, and you can probably spout some things back to me that they tend to favor in various times. But what has been the most interesting in my political life, and the reason I am no longer a conservative because I was, is that they always, in this retreat, they always back up, especially when they get power. So they turn out to be a much better, the Republicans, who tend to represent the bulk of conservatives in this country, tend to be a much more principled party when they're in opposition than they are when they're in the majority. They lose all their principles when they're in the majority. So they voted repeatedly to repeal Obamacare until they got control of everything, and then they didn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Right. I just think that's the nature of all ideologies, including libertarianism. I mean, I've seen people fight to the death over a treasury position of a two-party member libertarian branch. And you think to yourself, if you're like this already, what are you going to do when you're in the big leagues, okay? What are you going to do when you've got billion-dollar banks breathing down you and military-industrial complex with $1 trillion a year? You're going to fold. If you're already this bloodthirsty for the treasury role of a two-party member of a county libertarian group, you're not going to work. So, it's just the nature of human beings.
And this is why power is dangerous. Power is very, very dangerous. So we should diffuse this, David, to the most local level possible. The Treasury Department should be you. The Treasury Department should be me. We each have our own Treasury Department. We control that, and that should pretty much be the extent of it. We really should not have these large budgets for people to fight over. As soon as they do appear, this is exactly what happens, and the large budget can be just a few extra dollars you don't have sitting in some club's treasury. You're exactly right about that.
You know, you recently mentioned on social media that you were talking about, have we sacrificed enough already for the state in all the things they've wanted us to do for the pandemic? They're not going to take away college football and all this stuff because we didn't sit in the house long enough and drop the GDP down to 80% drop or something. You know, and it's pretty wild. It's pretty insane, the things that people are parroting. Do you think that the public in our lifetime is ever going to voluntarily downsize D.C. in a way that's like, you know, not forced because of a dollar collapse or something?
No. Let me put it this way. I think it's unlikely. But what I do believe, I kind of have gone back and forth on this over the years, and this is where I'm at now. So you talk about things I've reconsidered. I've become kind of a fan of Albert J. Nock's essay, once again, Isaiah's Job. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I've heard of it, yeah.
Okay, so essentially the story goes like this, to boil it down real simply. He's paraphrasing and borrowing some biblical prophet imagery, and he's got this prophet named Isaiah who says, you know, he goes back to God and says, I'm preaching, you know, I'm telling everybody the truth of the judgment to come, and no one is listening. Nothing has changed. Everything I'm doing is completely futile. And then he says, there's no point in continuing. And God says, wait a minute. I want you to know that there are 3,000 men who have not bent the knee to Baal once, not even once. And the thing that's holding them up, the thing that's reinforcing them, is your voice. So your role isn't to change anyone's mind out there. Your role is to take care of these people that I call the remnant. Your role is to bolster their spine, help them continue to stand and not bend the knee to Baal. That's your purpose. You don't know who they are, but I promise you, when everything goes south, when everything collapses, those are the people that will come along. They will be the ones prepared to rebuild because they have the character and the integrity to do it. And so I think our job, as much as is possible, maybe our primary job, involves building up as much of that remnant as possible. I love the fact that every day David Gornosky has this outpost where he is constantly sharing a message that isn't being shared widely enough and having a deeper discussion. I try to do the same thing in my social media posts. I want as much as possible to find my people. I want to find the remnant. I want to encourage them even when they're not reading. And so yesterday I was engaged in some pretty contentious debates on my Facebook page, not something I normally do. And I do that because there's almost always an audience that's watching what's happening, and I want to encourage them. I may never know how I touched or changed them. I may never get the benefit of hearing that. But maybe today someone reads it, and maybe that person is perhaps the next Thomas Jefferson. Maybe that person is the person who will actually, you know, invent the necessary technology, come up with the necessary reform, lead enough people to this message. Maybe they're in that audience at the moment. Maybe, David, they're listening to us right now.
Well, very good, Jim. I appreciate talking to you as always, and I want people to visit downsizedc.org. And where else can people find your work, Jim?
Sometimes at the Advocates for Self-Government, and sometimes at the Zero Aggression Project.
Well, very good. Thanks again for joining us, Jim Babka.
Thank you, David.
We'll be back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice with more. Don't miss it.
David Vernosky here. You probably know that it's good to own some gold. Now I want to tell you about Monetary Metals, a company started by my frequent guest, Keith Weiner. The conventional way to own gold is to buy coins at high cost and hide them at home, or pay annual fees to store them in a vault, where they just sit there. Monetary Metals is different. With Monetary Metals, we'll buy gold just above spot and then put it to work so that you're earning interest, paid out not in dollars, but in more ounces of gold. To top it off, there are zero no vault fees. So stop having your metal just sit there. Upgrade to monetary metals today and start earning interest on it. Upgrade at interestongold.com/David. That's interestongold.com/David.
For over 18 years, I've enjoyed an AB rating of 5.0 out of 5.0 from Market. I received this from my fellow lawyers and judges. If you've been injured, call Diaco Law at 888-SOS-FIRM. At Diaco Law, we will take your call. Medical malpractice or wrongful death? Call SOS. Call Diaco Law at 888-SOS-FIRM for a free injury case evaluation. And remember, there's no fees or costs unless we win. At Diaco Law, we will take your call.
We would love to welcome Julie and Steve Weintraub and the Golden Diamond Source back to the J.P. Peterson Show. They're once again one of our premier sponsors. They've been with us for a long time, and it's so good to have them back. And we're going to celebrate by awarding Tampa Bay's Golden Player of the Week. In fact, each and every day we're going to nominate somebody Tampa Bay oriented to be the player of the day. And then Fridays at 5, we'll announce the Golden Player of the Week, brought to you by the Golden Diamond Source. And of course, they are the great locally owned and operated jewelry store. Become part of the family. Buy your engagement ring there. Remember, they have the Diamond Savings Account. Your diamond never loses its value. You can always bring it back to get equal value on the purchase of a bigger, better diamond. So start a relationship right now. We've been with them for 10, 15 years. Get in there, get the best discounts in the land. And they are 100 days of summer. Great in-store promotions going on right now. It's the Golden Diamond Source, 3800 Omerton Road, and always online at thegoldendiamondsource.com.
Looking for cheap flights or cheap tickets? Call the low-cost airline travel hotline now for prices so low we can't publish them anywhere. We'll even save you money with cheap travel deals on hotels, rental cars, even complete travel packages. Call us first for the absolute cheapest prices on U.S. and international airline tickets and hotels. 800-811-3471. 800-811-3471. That's 800-811-3471.
I'm Christy Yamaguchi. Health officials recommend influenza immunization for people at risk and for those who live with them or care for them. The American Lung Association asks, are you one of the faces of influenza? See your healthcare provider about getting vaccinated.
Our Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm David Granosky. We just heard from Jim Babka of downsizedc.org about a lot of issues that are relevant to our time and how we're going to navigate through these unique landscape of our economy and our political fallout from the nanny state response to the new virus. George Papadopoulos online says, according to Senator Ron Johnson, Senate Republicans have blocked him from issuing subpoenas to both Brennan and Comey. I think we know who at least one of those names is. And, it just goes to show we have a one-party system. You got a few outliers. But, the thing that I don't like, so you got Trump, he's an outlier on a few things, but mostly stays on the party line, and he endorses the establishment candidates in primaries and, the future Paul Ryans and Mitch McConnells of the world, the, big government globalist types. And then he goes and tries to bury Thomas Massey, congressman from Kentucky, his career because he stood on principle. And that backfired. So it's interesting how, you have outliers like Thomas Massey, and they get attacked by another outlier like Donald Trump, who's not nearly as much of an outlier as Thomas Massey. But you got such a few little outliers that are willing to do anything truthful on anything, that it's a really shocking thing to see. But it's not shocking. It's just, it's pretty demotivating to be involved in politics when you think, wait a second. So Trump is endorsing people like Senator Romney, which he did, and many others. And then these Republicans won't even issue subpoenas to John Brennan and James Comey and these people who have weaponized, very apparently so, their police powers, surveillance powers, to try to control, who can go to, who could be in office and what they can do and what wars they can end and which countries they can befriend. And they can even lock people up for nonviolent crimes left and right, and nobody even does anything. That's a very Orwellian, nasty hellhole of a country to wake up to. And it's something that we have had for some time. But, the good thing about all this is that you can see it now. A little bit better, you can see it. And that's kind of truth in advertising. One of the reasons why, I am, it's kind of disturbing to see the rise of folks like Kamala Harris is how, at least with Donald Trump in office, the designated villains of our political fantasy that we call, elections and so forth, this where we have to have this fantasy of, we're going to have real change with these elections that we have. They designate people like Donald Trump to be the designated villains in the media. And at least with Donald Trump, you have a media which, for the most part, is going to be scrutinizing anything bad that comes out of the administration. They're actually going to do somewhat of a job. Now, they're not really doing a good job because what they actually do is even worse. They scrutinize him and try to vilify him when he says, let's get out of Afghanistan, let's talk to Russia, let's stay out of Syria. Whenever he wants to save human lives and save our money and cut imperial conquest by the neocons, that's when the media roasts him the most, and then they praise him when he's going along with the war. That's when they give him the biggest applause. But at least with the designated villains of the politically correct old media in office, you actually get a media that will actually say the truth somewhat, or at least call out things that are bad. They don't really do a good job, so it's barely even an argument to make. But, with folks like Biden and Kamala Harris and Clinton and Obama, these folks are so religiously devoted to the denomination of state power that these folks represent and leftism that the media just acts like a sycophantic PR firm 24/7. And the idea that any country could remain a free society at any level and have that kind of incestuous relationship between the media and the state and corporations is a disturbing thought. So we need to really challenge this unholy alliance. And some folks have said actually the media is in the driver's seat, not the state anymore. That the media, because they shape the narratives of our time, that they're actually in the driver's seat and they're not just the handmaiden of the state. That actually, because they're the myth makers, that they set the narrative and therefore they're actually in the driver's seat of state power, which is interesting to think about because, there has some validity to that in anthropology where the priestly caste, which was in charge of the taboos and the oral traditions and the scribal transmission of holy texts, they wielded a lot of power precisely because whoever writes history and whoever writes the myths are the ones that can then shape the contours of power and violence. And it's the use of the state, or what was the proto-state in those times. And so that's an interesting thought. Is the media really in the driver's seat, or is the state in the driver's seat anymore? It's kind of an interesting thing to ponder. But ultimately reminds us that we have a responsibility to be the media that we want for the future. We have to be the media, the messengers of what's true in economics, what's true about what's right and wrong, what's true about education and foreign policy, what's true about liberty, what's true about nonviolence. So let's do that job. I'm David Gronowski. We'll see you in just a moment for Hour 2 of A Neighbor's Choice.